The rancher stood at the edge of the field, watching the strange pattern unfold before him. His horse, a sturdy, reliable animal, had always been a creature of habit, but this behavior was different and natural, almost as if it had lost its mind. Every day, without fail, the horse would circle the same fallen tree, its hooves kicking up dirt with each turn. The rancher couldn't make sense of it. He'd seen the horse act a bit odd before, perhaps nervous or excited at times, but this was something more urgent. It was as if the animal was drawn to something hidden, something it couldn't comprehend but sensed deeply. The wind blew across the open plain, carrying with it a coldness that sent a shiver down the rancher's spine. There was no one else around for miles, just him and the vast, barren land. He often relished the solitude, but today it felt oppressive. The rancher's mind raced, trying to explain the behavior. Had the horse been spooked by something, or was it just the isolation, playing tricks on both of them? Yet, the way the horse moved, its eyes wide with anxiety, didn't suggest a simple fright. This was something more, something the rancher couldn't quite put his finger on. He took a deep breath and squinted at the horse, his hand resting on the worn brim of his hat. The horse had stopped for a moment, standing still at the base of the tree. It wasn't grazing, nor was it at rest. Instead, it simply stared at the tree, its ears twitching as if listening for something. The rancher felt a chill run through him as his eyes followed the horse's gaze. There was nothing special about the tree. It had fallen long ago, its branches now twisted and broken, a victim of a long-forgotten storm. Yet, for reasons he couldn't understand, it seemed to command his horse's attention. He thought about the land around him, the miles of open grass, the dry, cracked earth beneath his boots. Nothing about this place should be unsettling. This was his home. He had worked this land for years and it had always been predictable. The routines were simple, and life was solitary but satisfying. The silence was his constant companion, only broken by the calls of distant coyotes or the rustling of dry grass in the wind. But today the silence was thick, oppressive, suffocating almost, and the horse's persistent circling only added to the heaviness in the air. It was as though the land itself was trying to communicate something to him. After what felt like an eternity of watching the horse's strange ritual, the rancher decided he had to investigate. He stepped forward, pushing past the fence post that separated him from the field, and made his way toward the fallen tree. As he walked, the horse didn't stop its circling. Instead, it quickened its pace, its steps more urgent now. The rancher's boots kicked up dust with each step. He had no idea what he was looking for, but he knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. There was something here, something hidden that needed to be discovered. Perhaps the horse had sensed it before him, but now it was his turn to uncover whatever lay beneath the surface. As the rancher drew closer to the tree, his eyes scanned the area carefully. The air smelled of earth and dry leaves. His gaze moved over the ground, his boots crunching the dry earth beneath him. Nothing seemed out of place at first. The tree had fallen years ago, its bark stripped away by the harsh sun, its branches twisted in a way that looked almost unnatural. But as he circled the tree, he noticed something strange about the roots. They were exposed, twisted in a way that seemed wrong, as if they were trying to claw their way back into the earth. It was unsettling, to say the least. He knelt down beside the roots, his hands brushing against the dry soil. The horse had stopped circling now, standing silently by his side, as if waiting for the rancher to do something. He could feel the weight of the moment, the tension hanging heavy in the air. There was an eerie quietness about the place now, as if the land itself had gone still, waiting for him to make the next move. His heart raced, and for a moment he considered turning back. But the horse's odd behavior, the unnatural way it had been circling, kept him rooted to the spot. Something wasn't right here, and he couldn't leave until he found out what it was. The wind picked up again, rustling the dry grass and making the fallen tree creak as if it were alive. The rancher's fingers dug into the earth, pulling at the roots with an intensity that matched his growing unease. He could feel something beneath the soil, something cold and hard. It wasn't just a stone, or a root twisted into an odd shape. This was something different, something hidden that had been there for who knew how long. The horse stood quietly, its eyes locked on the rancher as if guiding him, waiting for the truth to be uncovered. The rancher's heart beat louder now, the mystery unfolding with every shovel of dirt he pulled away. What would he find? And would it be something he was ready to face? As the days passed, the rancher found himself drawn to the peculiar sight of his horse circling the fallen tree. At first he thought it was just a strange habit, or maybe a sign of restlessness, but with each passing day, the horse's behavior became more intense, more deliberate. The rancher could no longer dismiss it as mere coincidence. Every morning, the horse was at the same spot, walking in a tight circle, its eyes wild, its body tense. It wasn't like any behavior he had seen before. This wasn't just a restless animal, it was as if the horse was searching for something, trying to understand something it couldn't quite grasp. The rancher's mind began to race. The rancher tried to stay busy, focusing on his chores, but no matter how hard he worked, his eyes always found their way back to the field. The horse's movements were hypnotic, pulling his gaze like a magnet. Each time he looked, the The circling had intensified, the animal's hooves scraping the dirt with more urgency. The horse's focus seemed fixed entirely on the tree, as if the tree itself held some kind of answer. The rancher's concern deepened. He had never seen this before in any animal. The creature was restless, but it was more than that, it seemed, driven by something unseen, something unknown. One evening, the rancher stood at the edge of the porch, watching the horse's strange routine. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the land, and the golden light made the scene almost surreal. The horse had just begun another circuit around the tree, and the rancher's gaze locked onto its movements. The circling was no longer a casual loop, it was faster, almost desperate. The animal was agitated, its tail flicking anxiously, its head swinging as though searching for something hidden within the roots. Something deep inside the rancher told him this wasn't just animal behavior. There was a message here, but what was it? And why was the horse the one delivering it? Curiosity gnawed at the rancher's mind, but a sense of unease lingered in his gut. His instincts were sharper than ever. He had spent enough time in the wilderness to trust them. Something was wrong. The air seemed heavier when the horse circled, and the breeze that had once been so comforting now felt cold. The rancher wondered if it was the isolation getting to him, or if the land itself was trying to communicate something. He tried to shake off the feeling, but it only grew stronger with each passing day. The horse had become a symbol of the unease that had taken root in his soul, pulling him into a mystery he wasn't ready to face. Days turned into weeks, and the rancher couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away. The horse's circling continued without pause, but now the rancher's thoughts were consumed by the tree. He began to wonder what the horse could be sensing that he couldn't see. Was there something buried beneath the roots, a hidden secret that only the horse could uncover? His mind raced with possibilities. The rancher had lived on this land for years, but he had never encountered anything like this. And yet, he felt as though he was standing on the edge of something big, something important. Each time the rancher looked out at the field, he saw the horse, still circling. The days blurred together, each one an eerie repetition of the last. The rancher's initial curiosity had shifted into something more. It was no longer just about satisfying his own need for answers. It was about understanding the unsettling force that had taken hold of both him and his horse. The routine had become an obsession. He began to feel that if he didn't act soon, something irreversible would happen. The tension in the air was thick, and the rancher knew that. He couldn't keep ignoring it. It wasn't just the horse anymore, it was the land, the tree, the roots. Everything about the scene felt charged, as if something was waiting to be revealed. The rancher couldn't stand it any longer. He had to know what was underneath. But as he approached the tree, he felt a wave of hesitation. What if it was something he wasn't ready for? What if uncovering the truth came at a price he wasn't willing to pay? He glanced back at the horse, whose frantic circling had slowed to a steady rhythm. The horse seemed to be waiting for him, its gaze fixed on the roots, as if urging him to dig. There was no turning back now. He had to follow his instincts. One afternoon, after another long day of watching the horse, the rancher felt a deep sense of resolve. He couldn't ignore it any longer. The time had come to uncover whatever secret lay beneath the surface. The rancher grabbed his shovel, feeling a sense of determination wash over him. He had spent too many days wrestling with his thoughts, wondering if he should investigate or leave it be. The horse had led him to this moment. It was time to dig. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow across the field, the rancher felt a strange, inexplicable pull toward the fallen tree. The day had been long and exhausting, but something about the evening air felt different, thick with anticipation. He stood at the edge of the porch, watching the horse continue its endless circling. The horse's movements were becoming more frantic, as if urging him to act. But it wasn't just the horse that felt off, it was the land itself. The rancher could feel it in the air, a tension that hung like a storm just on the horizon. The ground beneath him seemed to hum, vibrating with an energy he couldn't explain. The wind picked up, swirling around him, carrying the scent of dry earth and sagebrush. As the gusts hit the fallen tree, it creaked and groaned, the sound unnatural, almost as if it were alive. The rancher stood frozen for a moment, his heart beating faster. There was no logical reason for him to feel this way. He had lived on this land for years, worked it day in and day out, but tonight was different. The tree, once just a natural part of the landscape, now seemed like something else, something old, something watching. The rancher shivered despite the warmth of the air, and his feet took a reluctant step toward the tree. As he walked toward the tree, his eyes locked on the horse, who was now staring directly at him. The animal's gaze was intense, almost pleading. It was as though the horse knew something he didn't, something that could not be put into words. The rancher's mind raced. He had seen animals act strange before, especially in the wilderness, but this felt deeper. There was something primal in the way the land seemed to call out to him. The rancher had always believed that the earth held secrets, that every corner of the world was hiding something beneath its surface. But this felt like more than just a hidden treasure or forgotten relic. It felt like something alive. The closer he got to the tree, the heavier the atmosphere grew. It It was as if the ground itself was watching him, waiting for him to uncover what it had kept hidden for so long. A strange unease settled in his stomach, and every instinct he had told him to turn back. But something deeper, something that connected him to the land, told him to keep going. The wind picked up again, this time stronger, and the tree groaned, louder, almost like a warning. The rancher paused, his hand gripping the shovel he had brought with him. Was he truly ready to face whatever lay beneath? Could he handle the truth of what the earth was hiding? The horse, still circling, whinnied again, the sound carrying through the wind. The rancher's heart skipped a beat as the animal's cry echoed in the stillness of the evening. There was something in that sound of desperation, a sense of urgency that the rancher couldn't ignore. The horse wasn't just acting out of instinct, it was trying to communicate, to warn him. The rancher took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the handle of the shovel. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Whatever lay beneath the roots of that tree, he was about to uncover it, for better or worse. But each step closer to the tree, the ground beneath his feet seemed to shift, as if the earth itself was unsettled. The rancher knelt down, his hands trembling slightly as he touched the dirt. He had dug before many times, but this felt different. The soil felt colder here, harder, as though it had been disturbed by something far older than him. He could almost hear a faint hum, a low vibration, coming from deep within the ground. It wasn't loud, but it was there, just beneath the surface, beckoning him. The rancher swallowed hard. He had to keep going. The land was calling to him, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. The wind howled again, and the tree creaked as if in response. The rancher's heart raced as he began to dig, each shovel of dirt feeling like a step deeper into a world he wasn't sure he understood. The horse stood nearby, watching silently, its eyes wide with a strange intensity. The rancher glanced up at the animal, its form a silhouette against the fading light of the day. Was this some kind of omen? Was the horse the key to unlocking whatever secret lay beneath the tree? The rancher couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer alone in the field. Something was watching him, something old and powerful, hidden, just beneath the earth. With each layer of dirt he removed, the rancher's sense of unease grew stronger. He was getting closer, but the air around him was thick with a kind of electricity, as though the land was holding its breath. He could almost feel the earth pulsating beneath his fingertips. The horse stood still now, no longer circling but watching intently. The rancher hesitated, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill in the air. What was he uncovering? What had the earth kept hidden for so long? And more importantly, why did he feel as though this discovery was destined to change everything? As he reached down to pull away the final layer of dirt, the air grew colder, and the earth seemed to tremble beneath him. The rancher hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. He had spent days watching his horse circle the tree, trying to rationalize the animal's behavior, but now the weight of the decision had become undeniable. Every instinct told him that something was wrong, something important. His boots crunching on the dry earth, he made his way toward the tree. The air felt thicker, heavier, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The horse, still fixated on the tree, remained eerily calm now, as though waiting for the rancher to make his move. His pulse quickened. It was time to act. As he reached the tree, the rancher stopped for a moment to study it more closely. His eyes scanned the bark, the branches, and the twisted roots, but what caught his attention was the ground around the base. The soil had been disturbed for it to be natural. The earth around the roots seemed to shift with every gust of wind, almost as if something below was moving. It was subtle, but the rancher had spent enough time in the wild to recognize when the land was hiding something. He could feel the weight of a secret buried beneath the surface, one that could not be ignored any longer. Kneeling beside the tree, the rancher ran his hand over the uneven ground. The soil felt cool to the touch, and there was a dampness too, that seemed out of place for the dry, arid land surrounding him. The roots of the fallen tree were tangled, some of them exposed to the air, others half buried. The way the earth had been displaced wasn't random. It looked as though something had been moved with intent. The rancher's heart raced as he felt a creeping sense of unease. Whatever was beneath the surface wasn't there by accident. It had been deliberately hidden. A chill ran down the rancher's spine as he considered the possibility of what might be buried there. He had spent his life on this land, working it with his own hands, and never had he encountered anything like this. The ground, the tree, the horse, it all pointed to something significant. Yet part of him wanted to turn away, to leave the mystery unsolved and preserve the peace of his isolated existence. But his curiosity and his growing sense of dread pushed him forward. He couldn't ignore it, he couldn't leave it alone. The wind picked up again, the dry gusts swirling around the fallen tree. The rancher glanced at the horse, which had stopped moving entirely. The animal was still, its eyes wide and alert, but there was no fear, only a calm focus. It was almost as if the horse knew what was about to happen. The rancher's hand gripped the shovel tighter, the weight of his decision settling heavily on his shoulders. He had no idea what he was about to uncover, but he knew one thing for certain. This was no longer just about a curious horse. It was about something much larger. With a deep breath, the rancher stood up and walked around the tree, continuing to examine the area. There were no obvious signs of digging or damage beyond what was immediately around the roots, but something felt off. It wasn't the tree itself, it was the land surrounding it. The earth looked as though it had been disturbed recently, perhaps even within the last few days. His eyes narrowed as he thought back to the first time he saw the horse circling the tree. Was it possible that the animal had been trying to tell him something all along, guiding him to this very spot? His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, sharp crack. The rancher froze, his body tense. It was just the tree, he told himself, but the sound seemed too deliberate, too purposeful. His pulse raced as he knelt back down, eyes scanning the ground once more. The horse, still silent and unwavering, stood at attention. It was as though the land had been waiting for him to arrive, waiting for him to make the decision to dig. He could feel it now, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. Whatever was hidden beneath this tree, it was waiting for him to uncover it. The decision was made. The rancher knew he couldn't walk away now. His instincts had led him here, and there was no turning back. With a heavy sigh, he picked up his shovel and planted it firmly into the ground. There was something buried beneath this tree, and no matter how much he feared what it might be, he couldn't leave it hidden any longer. The earth gave way with a satisfying crunch as the shovel dug deeper into the soil, and the rancher's heart raced with both excitement and fear. The truth was waiting just beneath the surface, and it was time to discover what it was. The rancher's hands gripped the shovel tightly as he drove it into the dry, hardened earth. The air around him was still heavy with expectation. He had been waiting for this moment, watching the horse, feeling the weight of the land's secret pressing against him. The wind had died down, leaving only the sound of his breathing and the scrape of the shovel against the dirt. The horse continued its steady circling, its eyes locked on him as though urging him to dig deeper. With every shovel full of dirt, the rancher's anticipation grew. What could be buried here? The thought gnawed at him, pulling him deeper into the mystery. The shovel bit into the ground. The rancher's mind raced. Could it be treasure? Something valuable? Perhaps old gold coins or artifacts from a time long past. Or maybe it was something far worse, something sinister that the land had held hidden for years. The rancher tried to push the fear from his mind, focusing on the task at hand. He was no stranger to hard work, but this felt different. This wasn't just a job, it was a discovery, one that might change everything. His muscles burned with the effort, and sweat trickled down his forehead, but he didn't stop. There was no turning back now. The first few inches of dirt were just as dry and cracked as the rest of the land. Nothing unusual, it was hard work, each shove of the shovel feeling like a step deeper into the unknown. As the rancher dug, he felt the earth shift slightly beneath him, the ground no longer as resistant. His heart quickened. Something felt different. He could feel it in his gut, a shift, a change. His hands worked faster now, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. What was it? A part of him wanted to pull back, to stop digging, but the other part, the part driven by curiosity, urged him to keep going, to uncover whatever had been hidden all this time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the shovel hit something solid. The rancher's breath caught in his chest and he froze for a moment, staring at the spot where the metal had met earth. It wasn't just more dirt, it was something beneath the surface, something real. The coldness of it seeped into his bones, and he could feel the weight of it, a tangible presence that sent a ripple of dread through him. He paused, his heart racing. What could it be? Was it an old chest, a barrel, or something else entirely? His fingers trembled slightly as he worked to clear the dirt away from the object. With each movement, the object beneath the earth became clearer. It was metallic, but the shape was unfamiliar. The rancher could no longer deny that there was something important here. He cleared more dirt, revealing a rusted, weathered surface, some sort of box or container. The object was much larger than he'd first imagined, buried deep under the roots of the fallen tree. The rancher's heart pounded in his chest, the excitement mingling with a deep sense of foreboding. He had uncovered something that was meant to stay hidden. But why, and who had hidden it here? The wind picked up again, swirling around the rancher as if responding to the tension in the air. The horse had stopped circling and now stood silently, its head lowered as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The rancher's hands, now caked in dirt, gripped the edges of the object, trying to pull it free from the soil. It was heavy, resistant, as though it was unwilling to be released from the earth. His muscles screamed from the effort, but he knew he couldn't stop now. He had come too far. Whatever was inside, he had to know. It was a question that would haunt him until he had the answer. After what seemed like an eternity, the rancher managed to free the object from the soil. It was a large, rusted metal box, its edges jagged and uneven. The surface was covered in dirt and grime, but it was clear that it hadn't been disturbed in years, possibly decades. The rancher sat back on his heels, staring at it for a long moment. What could be inside? He felt a mix of excitement and dread swirling in his stomach. His mind raced with possibilities, each more dramatic than the last. He could almost hear the earth whispering, urging him to open it, to uncover its secrets. With a deep breath, the rancher wiped the sweat from his brow and carefully brushed the dirt off the box. The metal felt cold and slick beneath his fingers, its surface rough and weathered by time. There was a small lock on one side, but it had rusted so much that it was barely visible. What was inside this box? The rancher's pulse quickened again. He had to open it to see what lay within. His fingers hovered over the lock for a moment, and then he gripped the metal with both hands, determined to uncover whatever secret had been buried in this land for so long. It was time to find out. The rancher's hands trembled as he cleared away the final layers of dirt, revealing the object beneath. His shovel struck something solid, and a sharp, metallic sound echoed in the still air. His heart skipped a beat. He paused for a moment, standing frozen, the weight of the moment sinking in. What had he uncovered? Slowly, cautiously, he began to clear away more soil, his eyes focused intently on the object now exposed beneath the surface. His breath hitched when he saw it, a wooden box, small yet heavy, its surface rough and worn by the passage of time. The box seemed to hum with a quiet, mysterious energy, as though it was waiting to be opened. The horse, which had been pacing restlessly around the area, suddenly stopped. The rancher could feel the shift in the air, the tension rising. The animal stood still, watching him closely, as though understanding the gravity of what was unfolding. The rancher wiped the sweat from his brow, his hand gripping the edge of the box. It felt heavier than he expected, and its ancient surface seemed to almost absorb the light. He could almost feel the weight of the years it had been buried here. The wind had died down, and the silence that followed was almost suffocating. The rancher knew this moment would change everything. With a deep breath, the rancher carefully pried open the box. It creaked in protest, as though reluctant to reveal its contents. As the lid slowly lifted, the rancher's heart pounded in his chest, each beat growing louder as his curiosity reached its peak. What was inside this box that had been hidden for so long? The first thing he noticed was a stack of old, faded letters. The paper was yellowed with age, fragile to the touch, and the ink was nearly faded beyond recognition. He gently picked them up, turning them over in his hands. But it wasn't the letters that held his attention for long. Beneath the letters, a few small gold coins glinted in the dim light, their surfaces worn and scratched by years of neglect. The rancher's eyes widened at the sight. They weren't large, but they were unmistakable. Gold, lost for generations. Yet, even the coins couldn't hold his focus for long. There was something else, something far more intriguing buried at the bottom of the box: a map. The rancher's fingers shook as he carefully unfolded the brittle paper. The map was old, its edges tattered and frayed, but the markings on it were still visible. Strange cryptic symbols covered the page, pointing towards something far in the distance, the mountains on the horizon. His breath caught as he studied the map more closely. The markings weren't random, they seemed deliberate, precise. His mind began to race, connecting the dots. What was this map pointing to? Was it a treasure, hidden away for centuries, waiting for someone to find it? Or was it something else? Something darker, perhaps a place that held secrets better left forgotten. The rancher's heart thudded in his chest as the realization hit him. The journey had only just begun. This map, these markings, were the key to something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The wind stirred again, the sudden gust snapping the rancher out of his thoughts. He glanced up at the horse, who had moved closer, its eyes fixed on the map in his hands. It was as if the animal knew the significance of what was in the rancher's grasp. The map seemed to call to him, the lines and symbols almost pulsating with an energy of their own. What lay ahead in those mountains? The rancher had lived here for years, worked this land, and never before had he felt so connected to something beyond his ranch. But this was different. It was as though fate had placed this discovery in his path. The rancher folded the map carefully, his mind still spinning with the possibilities. What could it mean? The mountains were far off, but they were there, on the map, and whatever lay there seemed to be calling him. He glanced back at the horse, who had resumed its quiet watch, standing still by the tree. It was as though the horse had known all along, guiding him to this very moment. The rancher's grip tightened on the map as he stood, a sense of resolve settling over him. Whatever the map pointed to, he would find out. There was no turning back now, with the box and its contents in hand. The rancher knew that the discovery was only the beginning. The journey ahead would not be easy, and there were more questions than answers. But one thing was clear: he couldn't leave the mystery unsolved. The mountains were calling, and whether it led to treasure or danger, the rancher was determined to follow the map wherever it led. The weight of the discovery hung in the air, as heavy as the evening sky, and he knew that his life, and possibly the land itself, would never be the same again. The rancher sat back on his heels, the weight of the map in his hands pressing down on him. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the strange markings and symbols that covered the surface. The letters, faded and cryptic, seemed to be part of a larger puzzle, one that he couldn't quite solve. The code was unlike anything he had ever seen, and the language, while old, felt familiar in an unsettling way. Each word, each symbol, seemed to hint at something much bigger. The rancher's mind raced with possibilities. What was this secret? What was buried deep in the mountains, hidden away for so long? The more he stared at the map, the more questions seemed to arise. As he studied the letters, it became apparent that they weren't written for just anyone to understand. The rancher had seen his fair share of old documents, but these seemed designed to be cryptic, a message meant to be deciphered only by someone who truly understood the code. The language was archaic, with symbols that seemed to speak of times long forgotten. The rancher traced the lines of the letters with his fingers, trying to make sense of them. But the more he deciphered, the more complex it became. This was no ordinary treasure map. It was a map tied to something older, something buried deep within the mountains, a secret that had been carefully hidden for generations. The map, now fully unfolded in front of him, was not just a guide to the mountains. It was a guide to something, buried within them, a hidden treasure perhaps, or a long-lost fortune. The more the rancher thought about it, the clearer it became that this was no simple find. The wealth described in the letters was not just material, it was something far deeper. The rancher had worked hard his whole life, but what was before him now was beyond anything he had ever dreamed. The possibility of untold riches weighed heavily in his mind. But there was something else, something darker that tugged at his thoughts. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned the map over in his hands. What was it about this treasure that had been hidden for so long? Why had someone gone to such lengths to ensure its secrecy? And why was it now, after all these years, being uncovered by a solitary rancher who had no idea what he was truly getting into? The more he pondered these questions, the more the weight of the situation grew. There was no denying it anymore. He was involved in something much larger than himself. The mystery was unraveling, but it was doing so in a way that sent a chill where down his spine as the evening sky darkened. The rancher felt an unease settle over him. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of the mystery he was uncovering. He glanced around, his eyes darting nervously. What if someone else knew about this secret? What if others were already searching for the treasure buried in the mountains? His pulse quickened as he scanned the horizon, half expecting someone or something to appear out of the shadows. The land seemed to watch him, its vastness suddenly oppressive. The rancher had always been alone out here, but now, he wasn't so sure. The horse stood nearby, its head lowered, ears twitching as if listening to the same unseen forces that seemed to be closing in on the rancher. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. The rancher's mind raced with thoughts of the past who had hidden this treasure. What had happened to those who had come before him? Had they been too eager, too reckless, and paid the price? The idea of being followed, of someone else knowing what he had uncovered, gnawed at him. He wasn't sure who to trust anymore, not even the land that had always felt like home. The rancher's fingers tightened around the map. The fear of what he might find in the mountains was now matched by a fear of the unknown, of others who might have already discovered it. There were no other signs of life in the area, no indications that anyone else had been around, but the rancher couldn't shake the feeling that the silence was false. The quiet, too still, too perfect, it felt as though the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to make his next move. He looked at the map again, the markings now taking on an almost menacing tone. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden rustling in the distance. The rancher froze, his breath catching in his throat. Was it just the wind, or had someone else been following him all along? The wind carried the sound of something moving through the underbrush, something deliberate. The rancher's heart pounded in his chest and he stood, cautiously scanning the land around him. The map, the letters, the treasure, all of it was leading him toward the mountains. But now he wasn't sure if he was ready to face what might be waiting there. Would he be the first to find the secret, or was someone else already on his trail? The mystery was no longer just a puzzle, it was a race against time, and the stakes were higher than ever. The rancher took a deep breath as he saddled his horse, the weight of the decision settling heavily on his chest. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. This wasn't just a journey, it was a leap into the unknown. The map had led him this far, but what awaited him in the mountains? There was no turning back now. He had come too far, uncovered too much, to let fear stop him now. As he mounted his horse, a strange sense of anticipation and dread gripped him. He had always lived in isolation, but now, for the first time, he truly felt alone. The mountains loomed ahead, their jagged peaks cutting into the sky like ancient sentinels. As he spurred his horse into motion, the wind picked up, howling across the open plains. The rancher's coat flapped in the breeze and he squinted against the harsh gusts. The landscape around him seemed to grow harsher with every step, the once familiar terrain now giving way to rocky outcroppings and uneven ground. The air felt colder, more oppressive, as if the land itself was pushing back against him. But the rancher was determined. He had been to the mountains before, but this time felt different. There was a weight to the air, a sense of foreboding that hung over to him like a dark cloud. The further he traveled, the more the landscape seemed to shift. What had once been open fields and gentle slopes gave way to steep inclines, sharp rocks, and twisted trees. The sense of isolation grew stronger. He was no longer just a rancher on his land, he was an intruder, moving deeper into territory that had long been untouched. Every step seemed to carry more danger, more uncertainty. The wind howled through the rocks, carrying with it strange whispers that the rancher couldn't quite make out. The deeper he went, the more he felt like he was being watched. The feeling was unsettling, and for the first time in years, He began to question whether he had made the right decision as he moved further into the mountains. The strange occurrences began. At first it was subtle, the occasional rustle in the trees, a shadow moving at the edge of his vision. But as the hours passed, the sensations grew stronger. There were sounds now, faint whispers carried by the wind, the kind that made his skin crawl. He paused for a moment, listening intently. There was no one else here, but the silence was almost deafening, broken only by the eerie sounds that seemed to echo from the distant cliffs. The rancher's pulse quickened as he glanced nervously around. Something wasn't right, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Every instinct told him to turn back, but he couldn't. The map had led him this far and he knew he couldn't stop now. The feeling of something lurking just beyond his sight intensified. Shadows seemed to flicker in his peripheral vision, figures that disappeared as soon as he turned his head. The closer he got to the marked spot, the more intense the sensations became. His heart raced as he pressed on each step into the unknown, feeling heavier than the last. Whatever waited for him at the end of this journey, it was closer now. The sky above had darkened as he entered a narrow pass between two towering rock faces. The path was steep, the jagged rocks pressing in on either side, making it hard to maneuver. The wind seemed to intensify here, swirling around him in violent gusts, pushing against him as if trying to drive him away. The rancher's breath was short, his chest tight as the sense of impending danger mounted. He glanced back toward the way he had come. The landscape behind him was a blur of rock and dust, and there was no sign of life, no sign of anyone else. He was alone, utterly alone, in a place where the land seemed to close in on him. The air had grown thick with tension as he approached the final stretch, the trail becoming more difficult to navigate. The shadows around him seemed to deepen, the silence more oppressive. The rancher's mind raced, his thoughts spinning. Was it just the isolation getting to him, or was there something more sinister at play? The wind howled again, and the rancher's hand instinctively reached for his rifle, though he hadn't seen anything that would warrant such a response. It was as if the mountains themselves were closing in on him, watching his every move. Finally, he reached the marked spot. His heart pounded in his chest as he dismounted, his feet touching the ground with a sense of finality. The area was desolate and open, clearing surrounded by jagged rocks and twisted trees. There was nothing here, no hidden treasure, no sign of anything extraordinary. The rancher scanned the area, his breath coming in short, quick bursts. He had followed the map all this way, through the harsh terrain and growing unease, and now he stood in the center of it all. But something felt off, something wasn't right. The rancher's instincts screamed at him to leave, but deep down, he knew the answer was right in front of him. The rancher stood at the entrance of the cave, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on his chest. The map had led him here, to this hidden spot deep within the mountains. The air inside the cave was cool, the smell of damp earth and stone filling his nostrils as he ventured deeper into the darkness. The flickering light from his lantern cast long, eerie shadows on the walls, revealing jagged rocks and a narrow path leading further into the depths. His heart pounded with anticipation. He had come all this way, and now he was about to uncover the secret buried beneath the earth for so long. As he moved deeper into the cave, the path narrowed, and the walls seemed to close in on him. It felt like the earth was swallowing him, a whole. But the rancher pressed on, driven by an insatiable need to know what lay ahead. The treasure was close now. His breath echoed off the walls, and the silence around him seemed almost oppressive. He reached the end of the tunnel and stepped into a large, open chamber. There, in the center of the room, was an ancient chest, its wood worn and weathered by time. It was exactly where the map had indicated it would be. With trembling hands, the rancher approached the chest, his fingers brushing against the cool metal of the lock. His heart raced, and for a moment, he hesitated. What would he find inside? Gold, jewels, the riches that so many before him had sought. The legends surrounding the treasure had always painted it as something of great value. But now, standing before it, the rancher realized that the treasure could be far more than just material wealth. He had come so far, and now, with the chest in his hands, he was about to uncover the truth. Slowly, carefully, he pried open the chest. Thought the first thing he saw was a collection of glittering gold coins and precious gems. They were beautiful, sparkling in the dim light, and for a moment, the rancher felt a rush of excitement. But as he reached further into the chest, his fingers brushed against something else, something more unexpected. He pulled out an old, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed and fragile, but intact. The rancher's breath caught in his throat as he opened the journal. This was the true treasure, not gold or jewels, but a story long buried. The journal's pages were filled with handwritten notes telling a tale of betrayal, greed, and violence. The rancher's hands shook as he read the words in the journal, his mind reeling with the revelations that followed. The man who had buried this treasure was none other than one of his own ancestors. The journal told a story of a long-forgotten conflict, a tale of ambition and deceit that had led to the bloodshed and betrayal of those who had once called this land home. As the rancher read on, he discovered that the treasure had been buried as part of a larger scheme, one that had been set into motion long before his time. The truth was far darker than he could have ever imagined. His own bloodline had been tainted by the actions of those who had come before him. The rancher's mind raced as he pieced together the details of the journal. The treasure had never been meant to be found. It was a relic of the past, a symbol of the corruption and greed that had taken root in his family's history. The rancher now understood the weight of the secret buried here and the moral dilemma that came with it. Should he take the treasure, claim what had been hidden for so long, or should he leave it buried, protecting the legacy of his ancestors and the secrets they had left behind? His hand hovered over the chest, torn between the temptation of wealth and the responsibility to preserve the truth as he stood in front of the chest. The weight of the decision hung heavily in the air. The rancher's heart raced, and he could feel the pull of both options. The gold and jewels would set him up for life, securing his future in ways he had never imagined. But at what cost? What did it mean to claim this treasure, knowing the bloodshed and violence that had come with it? The rancher had always prided himself on his honesty and hard work, but this was a different kind of test. What kind of man would he be if he took the treasure? What would the land and his ancestors think of him? The air in the cave grew still, the only sound the faint rustling of the rancher's breath as he considered his options. He glanced at the treasure one last time, the gold glimmering in the dim light, the journal now heavy in his hands. The rancher knew that this decision would shape his future in ways he could never fully predict. He had come looking for treasure, but now, he realized, the real treasure was in the choice before him. Would he take the easy path, or would he honor the legacy of his ancestors, no matter the cost? The cave felt suffocating, the walls pressing in on him as the rancher stood frozen in place. His mind raced with the weight of his discovery, but no answer came easily. The treasure had been meant for someone, but that someone wasn't him. He wasn't sure if he could bear the responsibility of taking it. With a heavy heart, the rancher closed the chest, the gold and jewels remaining untouched. He knew what he had to do. The land would be his inheritance, not the treasure hidden beneath it. And with that final revelation, the rancher turned, leaving the cave behind, knowing that some secrets were meant to stay buried.